In our headlines on this Thursday, December 12th, here in South Korea. In a televised address earlier this morning, President Yoon denied allegations of rebellion, claiming that the decision to declare martial law on the 3rd of December was an act of governance. And in a rare display of unity, both ruling and opposition lawmakers have denounced the president's defense of his brief martial law imposition and denial of any wrongdoing aimed at harming national stability. Meanwhile, the main liberal opposition Democratic Party of Korea looks to submit a new impeachment motion against the president in the near future, amid plans to put the motion up for a fresh floor vote this coming Saturday. Breaking days of silence following last Saturday's public apology for causing concern, President Yoon addressed the nation again earlier this morning to defend his brief imposition of martial law. Our correspondent Oh Soo-young is standing by live at the top office. Soo-young, let's start with details of his actual address.
Sure, Sunny. Thanks for inviting me. Well, first of all, the president, in his sudden 29-minute speech given on Tuesday morning, he vowed to fight until the end against forces that he said threatened the country's future, and he really defended his decision to impose martial law on December 3rd. He called it a political decision that was made under the president's legal authority.
거대 야당이 헌법상 권한을 남용하여 위헌적 조치들을 계속 반복했지만 저는 헌법의 틀 내에서 대통령의 권한을 행사하기로 했습니다. 그 목적은 국민들에게 거대 야당의 반국가적 패악을 알려 이를 멈추도록 경고하는 것이었습니다. 그럼으로써 자유민주주의 헌정 질서의 붕괴를 막고 국가 기능을 정상화하고자 하였습니다.
Yoon argued that he'd ordered only a small group of unarmed troops to enter the National Assembly and that they were called to immediately withdraw when Parliament overturned the martial law decree. He said he hadn't intended to shut down Parliament, saying that if he had, then power and water supplies would have been cut off and live broadcasts of the parliamentary session would have been restricted. Such rhetoric comes as investigators close in on the president for charges of insurrection. He's the only sitting Korean leader to have been placed under a travel ban. Citing repeated attempts to impeach him and his officials throughout his presidency by the opposition, Yoon blamed the opposition party, which holds a majority in parliament, for paralysing the functions of government and claimed they have been rejecting the results of the presidential election that voted him into office. He warned that if opposition forces come to power, the country's law and order would collapse, future economic growth engines would wither, and the South Korea-US alliance, as well as their trilateral cooperation with Japan, would once again collapse. North Korea, he said, would further develop its nuclear weapons and missiles, posing a more serious threat to Korean people's lives. Now, this speech seems to be a clear indication that the president will challenge efforts to charge and impeach him for imposing martial law, demonstrating that he's not willing to step down.
Right, Soo-young, and staying with that, I understand his address also included intentions to put up a legal battle.
That's right, Sonia. So according to legal and political sources, his aides have been reaching out to legal professionals, including former secretaries for the presidential office with legal backgrounds and also lawyers from prestigious law firms. And this comes amid reports that the presidential office has already conveyed Yoon's position that he would rather face impeachment than step down voluntarily. Apparently that's been conveyed to the ruling People Power Party already. And if the opposition's motion to impeach him passes this Saturday, the Constitutional Court has up to 180 days to issue a ruling, and another presidential election must be held within 60 days of that. This could prolong the required period for a new presidential election to be called to as long as 8 months, compared to the 2 or 3 months to call a snap election if Yoon opts for resignation. If Parliament impeaches him this week, then Yoon and his team will have to counter both the insurrection charges and the impeachment proceedings simultaneously. So then the key questions would be whether there was an intent to undermine the constitutional order, and also whether his actions amount to the degree of insurrection.
Right, I see. All right, Soo-young, thank you for that report. That was our Oh Soo-young reporting live from the presidential office. Now, the response from political parties to the president's latest public address has been prompt. In a rash of unity, both the ruling People Power Party and the opposition Democratic Party of Korea have denounced the president's denial of wrongdoing. Our correspondent Kim Do-yeon joins me on the line. Do-yeon, let's begin with the remarks from the ruling party then.
Sonny, it seems like even some, if not the majority of the ruling People Power Party lawmakers were shocked and at disbelief at what was said this morning. The chair of the PPP, Han Kang, said that President Yoon showed no will to end this term early, but instead showed his will to fight the political situation. Let's take a listen to what he had to say.
The address this morning will not be tolerated by the public. And from the perspective of democracy, we cannot accept the president's statement. Therefore, as the party leader, I assert that our party must take the initiative in promptly and lawfully suspending the president's duties.
So now with Chairman Han saying this, it'll be likely that the impeachment motion will be passed. Lawmakers individually have been coming out to openly support impeachment. There were 5 PPP lawmakers who were for impeachment, but following President Yoon's speech, 2 more have joined, making it 7 in favor. Now, last week, it only needed 8 members from the 108 PPP members to pass the threshold of 200 votes to impeach. But with Cho Kuk, the chair of the Rebuilding Korea Party, having lost his job after being sentenced to 2 years in prison, this makes it 191 total opposition lawmakers. So it may take 9 PPP members to pass the 200. Having said that, the new floor leader, who was voted into the job earlier today for the PPP, Kwon Sun-dong, said that the party's consensus at this point is against impeachment, but he will discuss it further with other members.
Right, Thurs, and I believe more words of indignation were shared by the opposition party as well in the meantime.
That's right, Sonny. They were quick to criticize the address. The main opposition went as far as to say the address showed his, quote, mental status. Take a listen to one of the leaders at DP early this morning.
The statement that to protect the Constitution he planned a failed martial law that goes against the Constitution and the law is the expression of his extreme delusion, an admission of illegal martial law, and a declaration of war against the public. It is a preemptive incitement of far-right unrest as if preparing for impeachment by prematurely presenting the Constitutional Court's arguments.
Other DP lawmakers also joined in criticizing, with some even saying that the vote for impeachment shouldn't be delayed until Saturday. In the meantime, the Speaker of the National Assembly, Woo Won-sik, called on leaders of political parties to meet to discuss the ongoing situation following the address as well. He said, declaring martial law to warn the National Assembly is something that can be never tolerated in a democratic constitutional order. That's all for now. Back to you, Sunny.
All right, and thank you for that coverage. That was our Kim Do-yeon with the response from the political arena to the president's defiance of martial law. Meanwhile, at the parliament, proceedings are underway to ensure separate probes into the president and the first lady and a new impeachment vote this coming Saturday. For more on this, our National Assembly correspondent Lee Shi-hoo is on the line as well. First, Shi-hoo, I hear a number of special probe bills have been passed. Do tell us more.
Right, Sunny. 2 opposition-led bills seeking to prompt special counsel to investigate President Yoon on insurrection charges and his declaration of martial law on the night of December 3rd, and another on 15 allegations surrounding First Lady Kim, including her alleged involvement in stock price manipulation case, have been approved this afternoon. The president's prosecution bill passed 195 to 86 with 2 abstentions among 283 present lawmakers in the meeting, and the First Lady's 195 to 85 with 2 abstentions among the 282 present at the time. This is despite the ruling People Power Party deciding as the consensus of the party to disapprove the bills. President Yoon's prosecution bill is separate from the previous one passed earlier this week. This is a more comprehensive, regular special counsel bill with fewer restrictions on the period of time and organization of the counsel. Now, this was the opposition's 4th attempt at passing the First Lady's prosecution bill, which has been vetoed by the president 3 times before and returned to the National Assembly for revotes, where it failed to meet the requirement for a second approval. Some 40 prosecutors may be chosen for the special counsel to investigate President Yoon for a maximum of 150 days, but the president himself has to appoint the members of the team, first recommended by the opposition. Furthermore, the nation's prosecution, the police, and the Corruption Investigation Office for high-ranking officials must comply with the request by the special counsel as well.
Right, I see. Meanwhile, also this afternoon at the Parliament, Chiu, impeachment motions against 2 government officials were passed, I believe.
Yes, the Assembly also voted today to approve the motions to impeach Justice Minister Park Sung-jae and the National Police Agency's Commissioner General Cho Kuk for their alleged involvement and for not having gone further to prevent the declaration of martial law during the meeting with President Yoon on the night of declaration. With the approval, their duties have been suspended immediately. Now they await a final decision by the Constitutional Court of Korea.
Shiu, where do we stand with the impeachment motion against the president? There is talk about the opposition party taking more time to fine-tune this particular motion.
That is correct. The DP just announced half an hour ago that it will reintroduce the impeachment motion on President Yoon at 5:30 this evening. The party had intended to go through the procedure yesterday, but said it needed to take more time to strengthen the reasonings for impeachment and also add new allegations that are being named. But the voting day does remain fixed to 5 p.m. this Saturday, unchanged. Sunny?
Right, that would be December the 14th. All right, Shiu, thank you for that coverage and do keep us posted. That was our Shiu reporting on the latest from the Parliament. Now, police officers reportedly returned to the presidential office today in Yongsan, while law enforcement agencies have agreed to work together to allow for an efficient investigation into the events leading up to last week's brief martial law. Our Kim Jong-sil has the latest.
Police investigating the December 3rd martial law crisis arrived at the presidential office on Thursday to gather additional materials. The National Office of Investigation sent officers to secure documents related to the declaration of martial law voluntarily submitted by the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Meanwhile, prosecutors have re-questioned Lieutenant General Yeo In-young, head of the Defense Counterintelligence Command, over allegations of treason and abuse of power. There are growing expectations that they may soon request his arrest. Additionally, in a bid to streamline overlapping probes, the country's top investigative agencies held their first joint meeting on Thursday. Their goal is to coordinate efforts and resolve inefficiencies in the ongoing investigation into the controversial martial law declaration. In a related development, the Defense Ministry has suspended Army Chief of Staff Park Han-soo, who served as martial law commander during the crisis. Park has been reassigned to a metropolitan unit while investigations proceed, with the second operational commander temporarily filling his role. Meanwhile, prosecutors have also summoned Health Minister Cho Kuk for questioning about his involvement in a cabinet meeting held before martial law was declared. He is the first minister to face questioning in the case. Unification Minister Kim Yong-ho also received a summon for questioning from the National Office of Investigation, but has delayed cooperating, citing the need to monitor how the multiple ongoing probes are organized. Separately, a special police team requested arrest warrants for National Police Agency Commissioner General Cho Kuk and Seoul Metropolitan Police Agency Chief Kim Bong-sik. They are facing charges of treason under the criminal law. Both are accused of restricting lawmakers' access to the National Assembly on December 3rd. Cho Kuk reportedly told investigators he received direct orders from President Yoon Suk-yeol, including instructions to detain lawmakers, but claimed he refused to carry them out. The police team confirmed that, contrary to earlier statements made at the National Assembly, the two met with President Yoon and former Defense Minister Kim Yong-hyun hours before the martial law declaration to discuss related matters. Kim Jong-sil, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff has called on the military to maintain political neutrality. The remarks to this end were made at a meeting on this Thursday, attended by relevant authorities to reaffirm the military's readiness posture amid what sources say is a leadership vacuum at the Defense Ministry. Chairman Kim Myung-soo also underscored the military's priority to protect the people and to uphold its alliance with the U.S. In other news, there have been some tangible signs of stability in the stock market as the government continues to maintain a close eye on daily trade. Our correspondent Moon Hae-ryun reports.
South Korea's market turbulence is beginning to stabilize following the short-lived martial law order last Tuesday, as investigations make headway and financial authorities respond to the situation. In the days following President Yoon's declaration of martial law and the subsequent lifting of it, the country's stock markets and currency plummeted to multi-year lows amid a prolonged impeachment standoff. The benchmark Kospi dipped well below the 2,400 mark this Monday to its lowest in over a year, while the tech-heavy Nasdaq closed at its lowest in nearly 5 years. Individual investors in particular sold a total of more than 1 trillion Korean won on the same day, nearly $700 million in net sales across the two markets. The Korean won also fell against the greenback to its lowest in more than 2 years. But over the past few days, the stock market showed signs of stabilization as the Kospi and Nasdaq closed up for a third consecutive trading session on Thursday. This comes as South Korea's finance ministry and the central bank continue to maintain their emergency response systems and engage in active foreign economic diplomacy. Since the shock declaration last Tuesday night, finance authorities have held daily emergency meetings, assessing the day-to-day situation and discussing contingency plans. After declaring that they were ready to deploy unlimited liquidity, the central bank began special repo operations to raise short-term capital, while a stock market stabilization fund and an around-the-clock task force are on standby. A key focus of the government's efforts to stabilize the economy has been to relay the strength of the country's economic fundamentals to international agencies and foreign finance leaders. This has come about through interviews with foreign media outlets such as the Nikkei and The Economist, as well as diplomatic meetings with foreign ambassadors. International credit ratings remain stable, highlighting Finance Minister Che's claim that the impact of the martial law incident has been limited on the South Korean economy.
Even though we had martial law, the real economy, production and exports are not really affected at all. So there's no reason to cut the credit ratings right now.
With next year's economic growth projections revised down by major institutions prior to the martial law incident, experts maintain that the looming threat of Trump's protectionist policies on South Korean exports could have a more lasting effect. Moon Hae-ryun, Arirang News.
And the U.S. hopes nobody will seek to take advantage of the political turmoil here in South Korea. The remark was shared by Deputy Press Secretary of the Defense Department, Sabrina Singh, in response to question about potential provocations by North Korea. She also reaffirmed that communication channels between Seoul and Washington were active in spite of the political strife here. She further claimed that a democratic political process was underway in the country. And back here in Korea, minor opposition party leader Cho Kuk has been sentenced to 2 years in prison for academic fraud and bribery. This latest ruling by the Supreme Court upholds that of the Seoul Central District Court that found Cho guilty of leveraging his influence to secure academic favors for his children and for receiving 6 million won in the form of their scholarships. As a result, Cho will lose his legislative seat and be barred from partaking in elections for 5 years. Author Han Kang sat down with members of the Korean media one day after the Nobel Prize award to share her thoughts regarding the global recognition and more. Our culture correspondent Song Yoo-jin was there.
For Han Kang, this year's Nobel laureate in literature, winning was a chance to reflect on how far she's come.
Writing my Nobel lecture really made me reflect on my past. It helped me figure out my coordinates, where I am now, and how far I've come. It gave me a clear understanding of my journey and a better sense of the path ahead.
Han's life story was given another chapter throughout this year's Nobel Week. When asked about her most memorable moment, it wasn't the grand award ceremony or banquet.
This morning, I visited a library where students sang songs, shared poems they'd written, and discussed my novels. One student wrote a poem inspired by my short story, The Fruit of My Woman, imagining herself as a tomato and saying, "I'd be tasteless, so please don't eat me." It was both funny and unforgettable.
The author also took the time to discuss her works, specifically how the Swedish Academy awarded her the Nobel Prize for her ability to, quote, expose the fragility of human life.
I aim to capture the incredible complexity of human life in my writing. My characters often face inner conflicts, vulnerabilities, and contradictions. I believe these elements reflect reality and are a more natural representation of humans.
But her works couldn't have touched the hearts of readers worldwide without good translation. Han expressed heartfelt gratitude to the translators, the hidden heroes who brought her books to life in 28 languages.
Some translators I've met, but many I haven't. Yet, through our shared work, we are connected. I am deeply grateful to them. I also hope that the works of more Korean authors will be translated, not for awares, but to reach more readers.
And for those eagerly waiting for her next novel, Han reassured them that while it may take time, it will come.
I'd been working on a Snow Them trilogy, but the final instrument turned into something entirely different, which became We Do Not Part. Now, I must return to the trilogy and start over. Once Nobel Weeks ends, I plan to return a quieter life to focus on completing it.
So from winning the Man Booker International Prize in 2016 to the Nobel Prize in Literature this year, Han Kang is redefining Korea's literary legacy. What stories she will pen and what milestones she'll achieve more remain to be seen. 송유진, Arirang News, Stockholm.
On Wall Street, the tech-heavy Nasdaq closed above the 20,000 mark for the first time in its latest session as investors bet big on yet another rate cut by the Federal Reserve as U.S. consumer prices largely hover within expectations. Our Singh explains.
The tech-heavy Nasdaq saw a milestone closing on Wednesday when it rose 1.8% on the day to close at 20,034.89. This marks the first time that the index surpassed the 20,000 mark. The latest milestone was the result of a major rally led by so-called big tech firms over the past few years. The Nasdaq has risen around 90% since the index saw a sharp drop in 2022, driven by growing expectations over AI. Of the 5 major U.S. tech companies, chipmaker NVIDIA saw the biggest growth during that time, rising more than 1,100% since October 2022. The index also continued the upward momentum that followed U.S. President-elect Donald Trump's win in November. It surpassed the 19,000 mark for the first time in early November, and it took just over a month to reach Wednesday's milestone. Economists also say positive trading on the Nasdaq on Wednesday was due to the latest consumer price index data. The CPI rose 2.7% on year in November, in line with market expectations. This assured investors that the U.S. Fed is set to cut interest rates once more before the year's end.
Weren't really any surprises in today's CPI number. I think the big pivot in expectations was, several weeks ago when it looked like the path for rate cuts wasn't going to be as aggressive as the market had originally priced in. So I think that's still the big open item.
This year alone, the Nasdaq rose more than other indexes. The tech-heavy index rose 33% in 2024 compared to the S&P 500's 27% growth and the Dow Jones Industrial Average's 17% increase. 이승재, Arirang News.
Over in Morocco, this year's Africa Investment Forum proved to be an opportunity for Korea to reassess and reaffirm its investment opportunities in the continent. My colleague Shin Ha-young has details.
Africa's infrastructure demand offers an annual investment opportunity of at least $170 billion, covering energy, transport, and digital infrastructure, according to the president of the African Development Bank speaking at the Africa Investment Forum. South Korea is among the top 6 non-African countries supporting the development of sustainable and resilient infrastructure in Africa through African Development Bank Group-funded sovereign projects. One expert says infrastructure, including transport and ICT, makes up a significant part of South Korea's ODA projects in Africa.
At the Korea-Africa Summit, South Korea pledged to increase its ODA to Africa to $10 billion by 2030. Korea's ODA strategy focuses on large-scale projects aligning with Africa's need for infrastructure development to achieve its industrialization and economic integration.
AFDB Vice President for Private Sector Infrastructure and Industrialization, Solomon Coiner, highlighted the infrastructure sector as a key area where Africa could benefit from investment and trade with Korea due to Korea's focus on innovation and unique solutions.
One of the big things we want to do in Africa is to industrialize Africa. The chaebols of Korea, really, present to us what is possible, at least what is possible in a generation or two. And so the learning from that and the partnerships, joint venture partnerships, between African companies and Korean companies in that whole industrialization space.
With concerns still lingering among South Korean companies looking to expand their businesses on the continent, the AFDB has been engaging with them to better understand the specific issues in each market.
Part of what I am, here to do, and what I hope I achieved a little bit when I came to Korea, is to really talk about, our investment opportunities and challenges, but more importantly, how we can help mitigate some of this to really encourage Korean companies to not only export to Africa, but also to invest in Africa and help us grow, our industrialization base.
Meanwhile, the three-day Africa Investment Forum in Rabat concluded after reviewing and discussing 37 investment projects across various sectors, including transport, power, energy, agribusiness, mining, and urban infrastructure. Many of the projects presented in the boardrooms received higher investor interest than estimated.
Securing $29.2 billion in investment interest, this year's Africa Investment Forum is expected to serve as another significant milestone for Africa and its partners moving forward. 신하영, Arirang News, Rabat.
In sports news, Saudi Arabia will host the 2034 FIFA World Cup. The country's bid faced no competition as it was the sole candidate. The announcement, however, has been met with condemnation from human rights groups who claim Saudi Arabia has been using sports to enhance its global image and to push attention away from its human rights violations. Now, separately, FIFA also appointed Spain, Portugal and Morocco as joint hosts for the 2030 edition.
During the daytime, Seoul rose up to 5 degrees Celsius, which is about 3 degrees lower than yesterday, and the feels-like temperatures are about 2 degrees lower than the actual readings. As the frigid winds strengthen, the weather is expected to get colder. In particular, due to the cold air, snow is forecast for the west coast tomorrow. There's a possibility that snow will expand to the Seoul metropolitan area. With snow coming, the coldest weather this winter will come around as the temperatures drop further over the weekend. The morning temperature in Seoul will plummet to -4 degrees on Saturday. Tomorrow, Seoul and Daejeon will start off at -2 degrees, Chuncheon -4 degrees. Highs will be topping out at 7 in Gwangju, Busan 9 degrees. The cold spell with cold winds will continue for a little longer until the middle of next week. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
Right, those are the headlines at this hour here in South Korea. As always, thank you for watching.